The state of Georgia. Pay attention to this because there's outrage, not just in Georgia, but across the country over a bill to repeal what's known as no excuse absentee voting. That would restrict ballot drop boxes, require more identification for absentee voting, and limit early voting days. And guess what happened? It just passed in the State House right along party lines, 97 to 72. No excuse absentee voting, this is important, was used by more than 1 million Georgia voters last year. Democrats say this new bill will create serious obstacles and reduce voter turnout more than it will increase election security. The bill now heads to the state Senate. I want to bring in Jason Johnson. He's a contributor to the GRIO, a professor of politics and journalism at Morgan State University. You know him as an NBC political contributor, and he just launched a new podcast called A Word from Slate Magazine. Jason, walk me through this. Is this just an effort to make it harder for minorities to vote after the state turned blue?
Yeah, that's all, Stephanie. There's nothing, there's no security issue. We literally heard the Georgia Secretary of State and other officials over the 2 months after the presidential election last year say, look, these elections are clean, these elections are safe, we vetted everything. They were literally arguing with former President Trump about these issues. But that doesn't change the fact that the Republicans who control the state legislature and the current governor of the state don't want to allow black, brown, and tan people to vote. They are angry that Georgia flipped blue. They are angry that Georgia now has 2 Democratic senators. So they're passing ridiculously restrictive laws. And I want people to really understand how bad this is. We had a pandemic last year. We don't know when the pandemic will be completely over. No excuse absentee ballots allowed people to say, hey, look, can you just send my ballot to me so that I can send it back in? They want to end that. They want to end weekend voting. They want to make drop boxes almost non-available. This is nothing more than voter suppression because they're mad that the Republican Party in the state can't win based on their values. They can only win through suppression.
Drop boxes, which for years have been safely and effectively used in states like Colorado. It's not just in Georgia, though. The Supreme Court is also looking at Arizona's election rules to see how much they impact voting rights. How much does it concern you that it's not just Arizona, it's not just Georgia? You got the Supreme Court looking at this and how it'll impact voting rights across this country.
I'm very concerned, Stephanie, because, look, we saw the same thing happen about 12 years ago when Obama got elected. America got its first black president, and suddenly racists all around the country were freaking out about voter security, which they had never cared about before. Now we have the same thing happening. If you look at Arizona and Georgia, these are 2 ostensibly red states that flipped blue that now have 2 Democratic senators, and they're angry about it. But Arizona is not just a problem because the Supreme Court can use what they're pretty much looking at right now is it okay for the state legislature and state officials to just keep moving voting locations, which always seems to happen in black and brown districts. The Supreme Court is almost guaranteed to say that's perfectly fine. We don't care. You basically, they don't rule that any sort of voting law changes are racist unless it's done by the Klan. And that's going to be used to open the pathway to all sorts of voter suppression around the country. And also, Stephanie, in Arizona, the legislature wants to pass a law that says they can overrule a certification of votes, and that the legislature can pretty much pick the president regardless of what the majority of voters in the state of Arizona want.
Jason, I do want to ask you about some very sad news we learned about in the last hour. Vernon Jordan, civil rights activist, leader, advisor to former President Bill Clinton, and so many other national influencers in this country. He passed away at 85 years old. How much of a loss is this? Who was he to this country?
This is huge. First off, I tell everybody, I encourage you to read the story, the book Jordan can read, Vernon can read. I read it several years ago. It's his autobiography. It talks about sort of his experiences growing up. It talks about this white banker that he worked for that was surprised that this young black man read during his breaks. Vernon Jordan is part of that generation like C.T. Vivian, like John Lewis, of African-American men and women who came out of the civil rights movement, were radicalized by that experience, but got into this system to try to make pathways for other people. The United Negro College Fund, helping out Bill Clinton. There are so many hundreds of thousands of students at HBCUs who benefited from the mentorship, the money he raised, and everything else like that. Vernon Jordan's passing is a massive, massive loss in this country. And I'll tell you, Stephanie, part of why I woke up this morning to these text messages. Every single black political scientist and reporter and journalist is mourning the loss and sharing personal stories about him. It's it's a really sad morning.
And we're going to be sharing more throughout the day here on MSNBC. Jason, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. I appreciate it.